All right, guys, welcome back to the My Marketer Show. My name is Danny Decker. I'm your host today. I'm also the co-founder of mymarketer.com, where you can add a world-class virtual marketing assistant to your team. And I am really excited to have Paulie Hay with us today. Paulie is the managing partner of Hay and Hay Attorneys in the San Francisco Bay Area. Also a longtime friend. Paulie, really good to have you on the show, so welcome.
Hi, Danny. Thanks so much for having me. Excited.
Yeah. Thank you for making time. So for those that don't know, why don't you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about the law firm?
Sure. I was able to found Hay and Hay with my father back in 2006. He was a district attorney and had a 35-year career there and retired so that we could found our practice. And we've been helping business owners and with a niche in horse-related business owners for the last 19 years, spending my life both in the horses and the law.
I love it, and I really do think that it's such a fascinating world. We're talking, in the green room before we went live. I've always thought the equine world is just so fascinating and so interesting, and like it is a business, right? And so obviously, and you can share on this, obviously there's very specific like business principles that are probably exactly the same in equine as anywhere else. But like before you even get into that, like just talk about kind of how you got there. I know you said you kind of grew up around horses. Is that right?
Yeah, so my mom was a horse trainer. So I was pretty much on a horse before I could walk, and grew up at the barn. And throughout my childhood and my time in high school, I saw a lot of business transactions that involved horses. And I saw many that could have gone differently if an attorney or an advisor had been involved. And that was really what drove me to want to both go into the law and then once I was in there, figure out how to protect people within the horse industry and business owners in general from making mistakes. Because what I saw and I've seen over the last 19 years is a lot of mistakes are preventable if someone has the right advice, the right person sort of by their side at the beginning. So that's sort of how I ended up getting into this area of practice. I do still have horses. My twins ride as well and compete in the hunter jumper world. So the horse side is certainly my passion, and as well as the law.
Yeah, I love it. So do you personally get out and ride pretty often?
I do. I get to ride. Right now we're down to only one horse, so and I get to ride when my daughter's not around or whatnot. So I ride her horse right now. But when she goes to college in a year, I'll be able to ride more because the horse will stay here.
That's super cool. I've ridden a horse, I want to say like 2 or 3 times in my life, and it's really scary when you're not when you don't know what you're doing. I'm used to like electric vehicles or things you have control on, but you're like, wow, I really have little to no control of the situation here. At least that was my feeling.
Yeah, luckily, I think when you've been riding as long as I have, you do feel like you have more control in most situations. But of course, it is a live animal, so there's things that you can't control or whatnot. So, but yeah, no, I love riding, and I feel very lucky that I still get to and have been able to do it pretty much my whole life.
That's awesome. So, you mentioned one of the things that like caught your eye early on was just this idea that like there are a lot of issues in the equine world that really could have been preventable. And, I think that's probably a big theme that I want to take over to like the general business conversation. But before we do that, just like, I'm just curious, like, honestly, like what are some of those issues that, in the equine world that, owners or trainers or whoever like run into that, maybe they could have prevented?
I think a lot of it is, it used to be doing deals on a handshake, which I do see both in the equine and in even general business. I'm sure you've seen it across your business as well. And so it's sort of this idea of, this is a more casual relationship. I know this person really well, so let's just, make this happen. And what I'm often telling clients is that works great until something goes wrong. And yes, you might do 50 business deals, and you do it like that and there's no problem, and then it only takes one problem to make a much bigger issue. And a lot of times people find me and our office after they've already gotten into that problem, and then they say, oh, we're not doing anything again without using an attorney. And so really my goal has been to try to educate people like, hey, it doesn't cost that much to use an attorney, and then you make sure these bigger problems are prevented. So in the long run, it's really saving you money and time and just overall energy as well. So within specifically for the horses, you know, buying a horse or leasing a horse on a handshake, or not even only a handshake, but just with a really poorly drafted contract, whether it's like a form you get off of Google, or, you know, even today with AI, I've seen some things that clients give me that just won't hold up in court or don't hit on the right issues. And so then that can even cause, if a bad contract can be just as bad as not having a contract at all.
Let's talk about that for a second, because obviously that's like, man, AI is just changing the world for all of us. And, you know, one of my businesses, we work a lot with law firms specifically. And so we're hearing a lot of that where, you know, clients will draft something on ChatGPT and then give it to a lawyer to review. And like, but then what that tells me is that 95% of folks out there are drafting things on ChatGPT and not even bringing it to a lawyer to review. And like, just talk about why that is like not a great idea.
Sure. I mean, I think we've probably all heard that AI can hallucinate and make things up. At least within all of my legal friends, we've talked a lot about that and how it's made up cases and that sort of thing. And I've seen it. I actually, one of the things that I've noticed is I'll draft documents for a client. I work a lot of times with people that own horse properties. And so there's a lot of liability exposure. And so they come to me to help protect that. And we draft the documents, and then they take my documents and run them through AI and say, oh, well, what about this? And so one of the things is California is one of the only 2 states not to have an equine liability statute. So it's us and Maryland. So here in California, to get liability protection, you have to have a well-drafted release of liability. And so this client said, oh, and like rewrote things with AI, putting in a fake California liability statute. So it's, you know, that's just one small example. I think also, while AI is getting smarter and better, you know, and you can sort of prompt it to try to, you know, not do that. If you don't have the underlying knowledge, you're not going to be able to I mean, he didn't pick up on that was the case, but for me, it's what I do every day. So obviously I can read through that and go, oh no, that won't work. Or it'll switch. The other thing I've seen a lot is it might just sort of twist the holding of a case, that sort of thing, which can be very hard, even like as you're reading the case. Okay, is this really what it's saying? But it's not. So yeah, those are just a few examples.
I think you're like average consumer out there, you know, because you can jump on the ChatGPT and tell it to create a contract or an estate plan or something. And it's like, because it will spit out something that looks like it looks legal and it sounds like it's using like the right buzzwords and stuff, people just think that like, oh, well, that's all I need. And it's like, man, you know, to your point, you don't find out that it was insufficient like until it's too late, and then it's so costly. So that does like lead me to kind of where I wanted to take the conversation, which is, so at My Marketer, we work a lot with founders, small businesses, people that are growth oriented, right? And so they're excited about marketing, and they're excited about sales, and they're excited about hiring, and they spend a lot of their time, you know, working with their clients and their customers. And consistently, like, legal just isn't the fun and exciting thing for a founder as they're growing their business. And so we tend to put things off, right? And not deal with things until they're too late. So like, you've been around the block, you've seen this. Like, what advice do you give to somebody that like doesn't really want to think about legal because they're just in the early stages of growing their business?
I think the advice I would say is, even if you don't want to think about it, you need to, because as your business grows, those problems that might seem small or inconsequential right when you're starting can become a lot bigger and have a lot bigger consequences. especially, and where I've seen this happen is when you get to the point where you're selling your business or you're dissolving your business. If you don't have those foundational steps and contracts and your entity set up correctly from the beginning, it's a lot bigger of a more of a problem when you're either selling it or dissolving. I think especially if you have partners or you start a business with someone together, and it's you guys are friends and we're just gonna start this, and then it turns into something amazing and then someone gets unhappy. How do you get out of it? And without something in writing, it can be really costly and a big emotional problem as well. So I've dealt with that with several clients who started their business just as friends, and then I'm brought in at the dissolution part, and myself and another attorney are literally negotiating over small assets that are worth almost nothing and certainly less than our hourly rate. And if they had just had something at the beginning, it would have been set up a lot better and been easier.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. And I feel like another really early decision for founders is literally just how to establish their business, right? Like LLC or S corp or none of the above. And I think a lot of business owners are just kind of they ask their friend or they ask their parents or something, and they just choose whatever seems easiest. But I've heard you talk about it really is important. An LLC is very different from an S corp, which is very different from a sole proprietor. So how does somebody go about making that decision?
Sure. I think there's several factors that go into making that decision. Most people, if you just sort of say, hey, I want to start a business, you're starting as a sole proprietor, maybe you go and get a business license from your county that you're in, that sort of thing. And then I do have some people that are really proactive and, call and say, okay, this is what we're doing. What is the best way? So certainly reaching out to your advisors, like you're either an attorney and your CPA or whoever helps you with on the tax front can be helpful. An LLC and corporations, they both provide you with a layer of liability protection, which is really important in any business. Obviously, in horse-related businesses, there's a lot of exposure if you're a trainer and you're giving lessons and someone falls off and brings a lawsuit. You don't want that person to come after your personal home that you own or any of your other personal assets. So LLCs and corporations, provided they're set up right, can provide that layer of protection. When you're trying to decide between different entity types, that's really where your advisors are going to come in. An LLC is a pass-through entity. Once you get to corporations, if you do an S election, it's really a lot of it's about taxes. When you make a certain amount of money, you can take salary for some and then distributions for the others. So that's really where someone who knows your finances can be really helpful as well.
So for the founders out there who just made the decision kind of impulsively or whatever and didn't put a ton of thought into it, is it too late? Are they locked in, or is it one of those things where they should reach out and have a conversation and they can potentially change it?
Yeah, no, it's never too late. And I would say reach out as soon as you sort of realize, maybe I do want to make sure that I've got this set up properly. You can change entity types. You can create an entity after the fact. So it's never too late to do that. I think always better to get it right. The other thing I would say is, and one thing I often see with sort of small businesses that try to DIY it, you want to make sure that whatever your operating agreement or partnership agreement isn't just a template or just like a vanilla generic type thing. I've seen that cause problems down the road as well. So making sure that whatever entity you decide to choose, then your agreements are drafted specifically to your situation.
That makes a lot of sense. And Polly, I've also heard you talk about, the idea of having, protection through an LLC or something like that. And, and a lot of business owners, I think, have an S corp or they have an LLC, and so they assume that they're good. Their personal assets are totally separate. But I've heard you say that doesn't always hold up. Is that fair?
Yes, there's something called piercing the corporate veil. And so basically, that's when, if there's a lawsuit and the courts think that you're not really acting as a business, you're not running things properly, they can potentially pierce through the veil of your entity and get to your personal underlying assets. So, one example I like to give clients is, you don't want to commingle funds. So, you get this corporation set up, you're going to get its own EIN, you're going to get bank accounts, insurance policies, all of that in the name of the corporation. But say, and this often happens sort of in this like early growth stage, say you've had a big sale, you've got a lot of money in your business account, and you go to the store to buy groceries, and you're like, I don't quite have enough in my personal account, I'll just use the business account. That's like a big no-no. What you want to do is make sure there's some sort of distribution or salary coming to you, so then you can use that money personally, as opposed to just using your business card to buy personal, or in the alternative, using your personal because you need a new computer for the business to buy that computer and then not really documenting it properly. So that's just one small example of how the veil can be pierced.
I feel like that's a really sort of practical conversation we could maybe have right now for founders, right? Who maybe, I don't know. I'll just speak for myself, especially in the early days, I just assumed that once I had like an LLC set up, it was bulletproof. I didn't have to think about, any of like the idea of piercing the veil was, I don't know, just something I never thought of. So you mentioned like not commingling funds. That makes a ton of sense. Are there some other just like practical, I don't know, red flags, things that business owners should really watch out for to minimize that risk?
Sure. I think it depending on the type of entity that you have, obviously there's organizational requirements or formational requirements. An LLC is great because you don't have to have annual meetings, and there's the formalities a lot less. Whereas with a corporation, you do need to hold those formal meetings, that sort of thing. Other things, I always tell clients is, hey, make sure that you have a business plan. Make sure that you can really document that what you are doing is a business, not just a hobby or some sort of personal endeavor. Obviously, that's a conversation I have a lot with horse businesses or people that, maybe have a family property and are trying to sort of run it as a business, but not quite. So making sure that you're really following all the corporate formalities, making sure you have insurance that's in the name of the business, those types of things. And then the other thing I would say is, every 12 to 18 months, checking in with the attorney that helped you form your business and make sure that there's not anything you need to update. I often will do a business audit, and it's amazing when someone's been in business for several years, you go in and look at and go, oh, actually all of these things have changed in the last few years, but I didn't update them, those types of things. So
that makes so much sense. Again, one of my businesses, we work almost exclusively with law firms, and so as we've grown our businesses, we've got a local business attorney here, and we've always sort of been of the mindset that like you should really just put legal as like a line item on your budget, so that every month or every quarter or every year or whatever, you save up for that expense, and you spend that money in the way you just described, where it's preventative and it's checking up on things. And, is that a guarantee that there won't be big issues down the future? Not necessarily, but, I've heard you say and others say enough that, like, you spend a little bit of time and money kind of as you go to just avoid some potentially really massive headaches down the road. I mean, is that a fair way to think about it?
Absolutely. And I think it's, you avoid them, and if, the worst case, the worst case scenario happens, which sometimes there's things you can't, that are outside of your control, you're in a much better position when that happens. That's the other thing I tell my clients. Like, I can't prevent someone from falling off and getting injured at your property, but I can put you in the best legal position possible if that happens. Obviously, we all hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, making sure that you've checked in regularly and kept everything up to date, you're going to be in as good a position as possible.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Paulie, I also heard you talk a couple minutes ago about, selling or exiting a business, and how I think if I heard you right, you said, sometimes there are some things that you uncover when you get to that point that make it more complicated or maybe cost you money, or so, like, what are some of those things that people need to be thinking about early on? Because listen, I think for most business owners, it may not be that they want to sell today or sell tomorrow, but like at some point, pretty much every business owner eventually wants to be able to sell their business, maybe just because they want to retire, right? But like
Yeah.
we all eventually want to be able to sell our business. So like, what are some of those things we need to be thinking about before we get to that point?
So I think there's several. One is obviously if you have business partners, making sure you guys understand the process for that. What happens if one person does want to sell and another doesn't want to sell? That type of thing. So that goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the conversation. With those operating agreements, partnership agreements. Another one is making sure that depending on the type of business you're in, you're probably going to have service contracts with other vendors, that sort of thing. Making sure, or with clients, that those are assignable so that you actually do have something you can sell, that it's not when you sell the business, everything is going to, immediately stop, that sort of thing. Another big one is if you're selling your business, making sure that you have security agreements or other documents in place so that if the person buying your business then defaults on the sale, assuming it's not a full cash sale, you're protected and you're still going to get paid.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, like, I'll just share my perspective as, a business owner who, I'm probably somewhere in that middle stage, right? I'm past the startup point, but, nowhere close to exiting. And I just know that it's like one of those things that it's just not the most fun and most exciting thing to think about. Like, I would rather think about a marketing campaign. I love marketing. That's what that's the thing that gets me excited in the morning. But I've seen enough, heard enough, even experienced enough to know that, like, man, just put a little bit of that energy and a little of that investment into making sure your legal bases are covered, and you're never going to regret doing that, but you really well may regret not doing that. And like none of us wants that. And so, I just echo that, and I think that's really good advice. So, Paulie, I want to transition the conversation just a little bit because, one of the things I've always been impressed with in working with you and having conversations with you is just your desire to like learn and grow. And I feel like you're somebody that has always put yourself out there in terms of learning new things, whether that's marketing or sales, or, I think we originally met actually at a workshop in like Nashville or something like that. So just talk about that and your mindset around like growth and mentorship and things like that.
Sure. I think we did. That was like, I think back in 2021, maybe a long time ago, where we first met at that workshop. And I think one thing I've learned as a business owner is that, continuing to learn, to grow, to stay in that growth mindset, to really try to invest. I try to invest my money and time in learning about how to become a better business owner. And that certainly helps your business run better and all of that. And you've been a big part of that on the letting me learn from you and your team on the marketing and sales, certainly. So yeah, super grateful to all the advice and whatnot that you've provided, Danny.
Well, no, I appreciate that. And again, I'll echo it, from my perspective. I mean, there's very little in business that like I came up with on my own, right? Like everything I know and have learned around marketing and sales is from doing what you just said, right? Sometimes spending money, jumping on a plane, paying a coach, paying a mentor, like really just absorbing and learning from people who have already figured it out. And then, of course, you do have to go put it into practice, because I think that's something we've probably both seen where, you can go to the workshop or read the book, but if you don't then take action on that information, it actually is pretty much useless, right? So you have to take action on it, and you have to, make mistakes and figure out what's going to work for you. But I do just think that's a really healthy mindset, and most of the, successful entrepreneurs I know spend a significant amount of time and resources like growing and learning and participating in coaching groups and mastermind. So I just think that's really awesome. And I love that that's something that has been, important to you. So I guess 2 more questions here, but before we get there, for our listeners who, maybe have legal questions, maybe they want a second set of eyes on their legal formation and things like that, how do people get in contact with you?
Oh, yeah, sure. So we have a website. It's blueribbonlaw.com. I'm sure you all have it associated with this podcast. But on there, we offer a business triage call and an equine triage call. So which allows us to, talk a little bit about what's going on and figure out really the next best steps for you and your business. We try to do the majority of our work on flat fees so that our clients know the cost up front and what to expect. We found that just gives a little bit more predictability and whatnot. So yeah, always happy to chat with people about their issues.
And which states do you guys operate in? Are you just in California?
I'm licensed in California and Tennessee. So those are the states that I can help people with right now, at least.
Awesome. So if you're in California or you're in Tennessee, visit Polly's website. Either way, you should, because she's got a lot of great stuff there. But if not, I think one of the big messages is, like, if maybe as a founder, if you've been avoiding, ignoring sort of the legal side of things, like, make today the moment where you stop and you reach out to an attorney and you just have them assess what you've got. Maybe things are structured well, maybe there are some things that need to change, but bottom line is, even if it's not a 5-alarm fire, like, take action now and get things in order now so that you don't have a disaster later. Or at least, to your point, Polly, if something does go wrong, you're at least in the best possible position, like, to deal with it. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, you can prevent a lot of things ahead of time. And so, yeah, even if you can't reach out to me, reach out to an attorney in your state to check in and whatnot. And if people, one other thing I'd say, obviously I don't know attorneys in every single state, but I do have a pretty big network. So if you're in another state, but you're thinking, like, I have no idea who to call, certainly you're welcome to reach out to me. And if I know someone where you are locally, I can help you. Another resource to always look at is most counties have a local bar association, which has a list of attorneys. So that's another way to try to find an attorney locally where you are.
Love it. And we will be sure to link to your website in the show notes when this episode goes live. So, all right, I leave everybody with sort of this final question, Polly. And the question is this: if there was one thing that you could just make sure that every founder understood about the legal side of their business, if you could just push a button and just blast this information out so every single founder knew it and understood it, what is that piece of advice or the idea that you would make sure that every business owner knows?
I think it's really that you can prevent a lot of problems with just a little bit of forethought and reaching out to the right advisors. You really can. And I understand your point. A lot of people maybe don't want to think about that, but if you have the right advisor, they'll do most of the thinking. So if you just reach out and make that first sort of, hey, this is what I'm doing, and then let them really lead you on that, that is really the best way to set your business up to succeed in the future.
Great advice. Polly, this was fantastic. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for sharing your experience, your expertise. This was awesome.
Thank you so much, Danny.
Thanks for listening to the My Marketer Show. Hope this episode was helpful. Stay tuned for more great content in the future. Please be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, if you would like to add a world-class virtual marketing assistant to your team, you can get started at mymarketer.com. Mention the My Marketer Show and we will waive the startup fee. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.